Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel all about BI. In this session, I'm going to talk about additional columns in copy activity. You may wonder why. Because we already have discussed so many times and we have come across lots of documents and videos about it. But what is so special about it? That's what I'm going to touch upon today. See, normally when we try to add any additional column, we'll click on new button and then we will either make use of the system variables like file path and column, with which we can mention the current file being loaded, as well as if we want to duplicate an existing column in the name of some other column like giving an alias, we'll make use of these system variables, right? If you don't want to use these system variables but just derive some value dynamically, you can go for add dynamic content. When you click on add dynamic content in the value column, you will be having access to parameters which are pipeline parameters, system variables, functions and variables, with which you can write your own expression like UTC now to capture current day and time. You can format it as well using formatting functions. So what are we going to see in this video is we are not going to use this new for adding a static additional column. When I say static, I have to declare the column name whenever I am adding additional column, right? And we can derive the expression according to our wish or requirement, okay? But if I can't give a static name to the column name and I have to decide the name of the additional column dynamically, how do we do it? That's what we are going to cover today. I'll delete this one and you will be able to see something called add dynamic content below the new icon. Okay, add dynamic content. So this is what is going to be used, this option is what is going to be used when we are not sure of what will be the additional column name, and which has to be determined dynamically during runtime. But why do we do that? Is there any use case for it? Yes. Assume I'm going to load multiple tables with different schema to set of delimited files in my data lake storage. Okay, if I want to add an additional column that captures current date time, like say loaded date again, okay, and what if any of my tables already has this column in its structure itself, in its schema itself? What will happen is your copy activity will fail, saying there are duplicate columns and it will not be able to map the columns properly with the sync. Okay, so we cannot have two column names with same name in copy activity. So in such situations, like if the additional column that we are trying to add is already there as part of schema of the tables, how can we handle this? In that time only we will be able to make use of this additional or dynamic content below the new button. Okay, so add dynamic content. But what is the syntax for it? I'll touch upon that now. Syntax will be a JSON syntax and in the format of JSON, and if you want to have multiple dynamic columns added, you can use the same syntax by suffixing comma. Okay, so what I am trying to do here is I am trying to declare an array of JSON constructs. Okay, name followed by the column name, value followed by the column value. This is the default syntax that we will be using in our pipeline if we want to add an additional column dynamically. So during runtime, what I will do, I will replace this column 1 and value 1 with the actual column name and the actual column value. Okay, this will be like a placeholder initially. Okay, so in this video what we will be doing is I have a pipeline parameter, okay, which will say like table has loaded date column or not. It is a boolean parameter. So while running the pipeline, we have to tell the pipeline with true or false. What does that mean? If I pass true to table has loaded date column, let us say table has loaded date column. If we say true, that means that whatever table that we are trying to load, it already has a column by name loaded date in it. Okay, so in that case we will pass true, and what we have to do is we should not give additional column name as loaded date. Okay, we have to give something else like dat or loaded timestamp or whatever it is. Okay, and if I say false, that means that I can make use of this particular column name itself, and my table doesn't have loaded date column already. Okay, so this is the first part of our solution. Okay, by passing true or false to the pipeline parameter. Based on this true or false, if it is true, what does that mean? The table already has loaded date, so we need to decide, we need to use some other column name. So say for example loaded date time. Okay, if it is false, then we have to make use of loaded date. This is the column, these are all nothing but the column names that we are trying to add dynamically in the additional column settings. Okay, so this is about a column name only, which will be replacing this particular placeholder. So what about value? During runtime we can replace this value also. Okay, if we want to just capture UTC time, right, I will just say UTC now. We will have to replace, basically we will have to do a replace of column 1 by the actual column name and value 1 by the UTC now. Okay, that's what I'm going to show you how I try to implement it. Alright, so before taking you through the actual implementation, let us look at the parameters and variables. So as I already told you, table has loaded date, this is the parameter name, it is of type boolean. Okay, default value I'm giving as false. During runtime we can override this. So based on this value, there is an if condition that determines the column name dynamically. So in my if condition, I'm just checking table has loaded date, because this itself is a boolean expression, so I need not write anything like equals to true or false. By default it will evaluate to boolean, right? So I'm just directly mentioning pipeline.parameters.table has loaded date. So if we pass true, the if condition will pass and go to the true part. In the true part and false part, I have a set variable activity. So the first set variable activity will assign loaded date time as the column name. There is a column name variable that I am using. If you look at the variables, right, I'll touch upon that as well. So additional columns, this is of type array. This is only going to hold the placeholder JSON construct for us. This is what is going to be passed as additional column in the copy activity. Okay, so additional columns is nothing but the placeholder construct for the additional column that is going to be decided dynamically. And final additional columns is nothing but I'm just going to copy this value to this value finally, because I cannot make use of same variable in the, we cannot have expressions that reference a self variable, I mean the same variable itself, right? So these are both are going to be the same. I'll just make use of additional columns in the expression and I'll assign it to final additional columns. Okay, both are going to be of type array. And loaded date, it is nothing but this is going to have my UTC now value, which is nothing but current timestamp. And column name, this is what is going to be passed as the replacement for the placeholder column 1. Okay, in this portion we will pass this column name, and in the value 1 portion we will be passing the loaded date. In the value 1 portion we will be passing the loaded date. Okay, so if in my if condition, as I said, I'm just checking if it is true or false, the table has loaded date. If it is true, I'm passing loaded date time as column name, and if it is false, I'm passing loaded date as column name. So ultimately we are just trying to decide whether I can use loaded underscore dt as additional column or not. Okay, so if the if condition evaluates to true, then already my table has loaded underscore dt column, that's why I'm saying loaded date time for the additional column name. If the if condition evaluates to false, then my table or source doesn't have a column by name loaded underscore dt, that's why I'm just using the same column name that I wanted to. Okay, so this if condition will be deciding about the column name alone. Alright, so second set variable, this is just capturing UTC time. Okay, so I'm just saying UTC now and assigning it to loaded date. So in the first two activities we have decided the column name to be used in the additional column setting. So this will decide the column name, this will decide the column value. Alright, so how are we going to replace it? That comes the second part. So I'm using another set variable, and in the settings if you go, I'm assigning to final additional columns. As I said, I cannot assign the value referencing self variable, so I'm just assigning the replaced content to final additional columns both of type array only. if you look at the value, it will be a simple replace. What I'm doing, I'm just converting the variables which is an array to string first, and then I'm doing a replace. I'm replacing column 1 with the column name value, and then one more replace, that will replace value 1 with the actual UTC now, which is stored in loaded date. Okay, and I'm converting everything back to JSON so that I can make use of it in the additional columns in copy activity. So this is all about the replacement or the actual construct that is to be passed during runtime to my copy activity. Okay, so coming to copy activity, I have a delimited text file as source. Okay, it doesn't have any column called loaded date. Okay, that we have to tell during runtime. So I'll execute the pipeline and show you. So for now, I'm just connecting to a delimited text. In the additional columns, I'm directly mentioning variables of final additional columns. This is what is holding the replaced JSON construct of our additional column. Okay, so in order to be precise, we would have replaced the placeholder with the actual values and would have stored it in the final additional columns. Okay, let me show you the source file now. I'm pointing to ADF v2 tutorial, and inside the output folder test2.csv. This is my source file. I'll show you the data. So it has 4 to 5 columns which doesn't have loaded date column. Okay, so when I run my pipeline, if I say true, then what we are going to do is we are going to copy this file and put it onto another file, okay, with loaded underscore datetime column. Okay, so I'll run and show you. It may be confusing if I keep talking. So what I'm going to do, I'll just change the settings to additional column test.csv or txt. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm trying to trigger my pipeline. So I will say table has loaded date as false, because it can be table as well as file, and in runtime you cannot manually keep passing parameter values, right? So in that case, what you can do, you can simply use a get metadata activity to get the schema or structure of the underlying source like file or table, and using the same if condition you can decide whether the structure already contains, using contains function you can check if it already contains the required column or not. Okay, so I'm saying false now. So what is going to happen, let's see. So pipeline has executed. So what happened is, while execution we just gave the value as false. So what has happened is, if condition has evaluated to false and has gone to the false part. In the false part, we have decided the value to be loaded date. Okay, so up to this I think we are clear and on the same page. So next to the second set variable 2 activity, we are just setting the UTC time. So this doesn't have much details to talk about. And replace placeholder. So in our placeholder variable, we just had column 1 and value 1, right? So after this set variable activity has executed, we will be seeing the columns being replaced, column 1 and value 1 being replaced with the actual column name and the column value. So as you can see here, I'm just clicking on the output of the set variable activity, which is replace placeholder with actual column values. So if you look at the output, we will be seeing loaded date under name and current UTC under value. Previously how it was is, the variable was holding column 1 here and value 1 here, which is being replaced with the actual column names now. So in the next run, if I say true, then we will be seeing loaded date time here with the UTC now. So finally my copy activity has executed, and I'll just refresh the data lake storage to look at the result. If we have an additional column by name loaded underscore dt with the current UTC for all the records. So this is the file that got generated, and if you look at the output, we have a loaded date column which is given in the additional columns field, with the current timestamp. Okay, so now what I'll do, I'll run the pipeline with a true condition. In this case, the if condition should evaluate to true, and we should be seeing the column name as loaded date time instead of loaded underscore dt in the output file. Here it is loaded dt now. It should be loaded underscore date time after the pipeline executes. So basically this is a very simple concept, but we need to know how to use the constructs and what to do while we try to use the additional dynamic content in the additional columns portion. So it has executed now. I'll go back to the data lake and then let's look at the output loaded underscore datetime. So this is how we decide the name of the additional columns dynamically. In case your requirement is such, you can make use of this concept, and you can also let me know if this can be done in a much better way as well. Okay, I would be happy to know about it as well. Thanks a lot for watching. That's all for this video. We'll catch up in a different use case and in a different video. Thank you to all the subscribers and viewers for your time in watching all the content. Thanks so much.